In the corridors of global power, a new game unfolds. For decades, the world map seemed fixed, its lines drawn by the West and the rising East. Nations were expected to choose a side. The continent has long been viewed as a chessboard, its nations as pawns. The West offers aid with strings attached, China offers infrastructure without interference, but shadows of debt loom. What if a leader refused to play, walking away from the chessboard? A new chapter is being written in West Africa. A young leader is challenging this global order, choosing his nation. This signals a crack in a system that has profited from a dependent Africa. Enter Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the interim leader of Burkina Faso. At just 34 years old when he took power in 2022, he was quickly dismissed by the world as just another military officer in a region plagued by instability. The international media painted a familiar picture: a power-hungry soldier, a temporary footnote in the turbulent history of the Sahel. But as the months have unfolded, a very different portrait has begun to emerge. Traoré is not following the established script. He is not making the expected diplomatic overtures. He is not seeking validation from the global superpowers, who have long dictated the fate of his continent. His actions are speaking far louder than any diplomatic speech ever could. Since taking leadership, Captain Traoré has systematically avoided the traditional rites of passage for an African leader. There have been no high-profile trips to the Élysée Palace in Paris to seek blessing from the former colonial power. There have been no delegations sent to Washington to negotiate with the IMF for bailout packages. Conspicuously, he has also kept Beijing at arm's length, refusing to be drawn into the grand spectacle of the Belt and Road Initiative. His silence towards the world's most powerful nations is not a sign of weakness or indecision. It is a deliberate, calculated statement. This deliberate detachment from both Western and Eastern spheres of influence raises a profound and unsettling question. Why? Why is Captain Traoré refusing to shake the hands that have fed, funded, and armed African leaders for over 60 years? Why is he turning his back on China's seemingly generous offers of infrastructure and investment, opportunities that many of his counterparts have eagerly seized? In a world where allegiance is currency, his refusal to align is a radical act. He is charting a course that is neither pro-West nor pro-East, but staunchly pro-Burkina Faso, and by extension pro-Africa. This is the core of the enigma. The hidden dynamics behind his strategy may hold the key to understanding the future of not just Burkina Faso, but the entire African continent. On September 30th, 2022, the capital of Burkina Faso faced another coup, led by Captain Ibrahim Traoré. The existing government, led by Lieutenant Colonel Paul-Henri Sandaogo Damiba, was accused of failing to quell the violent insurgency. Citizens supported the coup because they felt abandoned and had lost faith in the government. For them, Traoré was a symbol of hope. He represented a promise to prioritize the safety of the Burkinabe people. Traoré's rise was a direct response to failure. He stepped in to fundamentally alter the nation's trajectory. Captain Traoré's vision extended beyond security, rooted in national dignity and absolute sovereignty. It was about ending dependency as it had been practiced for decades. His vision was forged in the harsh realities of the Sahel, where foreign interventions failed. The path forward was one designed by and for the people of Burkina Faso. Traoré's rhetoric echoed Thomas Sankara, dreaming of a self-sufficient Africa. His goal, to dismantle the system of dependency. True sovereignty began with security, achieved by the people themselves. Traoré's vision is of an Africa that stands on its own feet. He imagines a Burkina Faso and an Africa no longer a pawn. Captain Traoré's strategy is defined by his actions, not words. His silence is a powerful statement. He hasn't embarked on global tours, nor has he delivered grand speeches at the United Nations. He refuses photo opportunities. This refusal is his most profound statement. He signals his government's legitimacy comes from the Burkinabe people. His actions have been as decisive as his silence. He demanded the withdrawal of French troops, ending a decades-long military presence. He severed ties to its former colonial ruler. Instead of the West, he turned to neighbors Mali and Niger. He chose regional solidarity. He has kept China's Belt and Road Initiative at a distance. Traoré has shown extreme caution. He understands the risks of debt-trap diplomacy. His administration ensures projects serve the nation's interests. It is a stance against all forms of external control. Traoré is navigating a treacherous path alone. He is betting that true independence is necessary. His leadership is a living experiment. For over 60 years, the relationship between the West and Africa has been framed through the lens of generosity. The narrative is one of benevolent support, where developed nations provide aid to help their African counterparts overcome poverty, disease, and instability. This assistance, channeled through powerful financial institutions like the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, is presented as a partnership for progress. It funds the construction of schools, hospitals, and critical infrastructure, and provides budget support to struggling governments. On the surface, it appears to be a lifeline, an essential tool for development in a post-colonial world. This carefully crafted image has dominated global perceptions for decades. However, this narrative of altruism often conceals a much more complex and manipulative reality. The aid offered by Western powers is rarely a gift without conditions. It is a double-edged sword, offering immediate relief, while simultaneously creating long-term dependency. These financial packages come with strict structural adjustment programs, demanding that recipient nations privatize state-owned industries, deregulate their markets, and cut public spending. These policies, designed in Washington or Paris, often serve the economic interests of the donor countries far more than the recipient, opening up African economies to foreign corporations under the guise of free market principles. This system creates a vicious cycle of debt and control. When an African nation accepts a loan, it becomes beholden to the lender's agenda. The conditions attached to the funds dictate domestic policy, effectively stripping the government of its economic sovereignty. If a country fails to meet its repayment obligations, it is forced to seek further loans, sinking deeper into debt and becoming even more susceptible to external pressure. This blueprint ensures that decision-making power remains not in the African capital, but in the boardrooms of international financial institutions. It is a subtle but powerful form of control, one that perpetuates the very dependency it claims to alleviate. Captain Traoré and leaders who share his vision have studied this blueprint closely. They have witnessed generations of leaders before them walk this path, only to find their nations trapped in a web of financial obligations. They understand that accepting this form of assistance means sacrificing true independence for short-term stability. Traoré's rejection of this model is not born from ignorance or radicalism. It is a calculated decision based on a historical understanding of how aid has been weaponized. He sees it not as a partnership, but as a gilded cage, and he has chosen to seek freedom instead. Alongside economic assistance, the second pillar of Western influence in Africa is military support. This includes providing weaponry, training armies, sharing intelligence, and establishing military bases. The stated purpose is to help African nations combat terrorism and maintain regional stability. However, this military footprint comes with invisible strings. Foreign bases project power and protect economic interests. The host nation becomes a junior partner, its foreign policy steered by its military benefactor. This dependency can undermine sovereignty. Captain Traoré's expulsion of French forces from Burkina Faso repudiated this model, reclaiming national sovereignty. The CFA franc, created by France in 1945, remains in use by 14 African countries. Pegged to the euro and historically backed by the French treasury, it's viewed by critics as neocolonialism. This system limits these nations' control over their money supply. Captain Traoré and others are now openly discussing leaving the monetary union. Such a move would sever colonial ties and challenge French influence. As African nations sought alternatives to the West, China emerged with a seemingly more attractive proposition: megaprojects and rapid modernization. The Belt and Road Initiative presented a vision of shared prosperity. For a continent with a massive infrastructure deficit, this was a siren song. China offered to build the highways, railways, ports, and power plants that African nations desperately needed, all under the banner of a win-win partnership. Unlike Western lenders, Beijing did not demand painful structural adjustments or interfere in domestic politics. The visual evidence of China's engagement is undeniable and impressive. This tangible progress offered African leaders something concrete to show their citizens. For many, China represented a genuine opportunity to break free from the old dependencies of the West. However, as the years have passed, the initial euphoria surrounding China's generosity has begun to fade, replaced by a growing sense of unease. Many leaders are now waking up to the harsh reality hidden in the fine print of their loan agreements. The term debt trap diplomacy has entered the global lexicon, describing a sinister strategy where a creditor nation intentionally extends excessive credit with the alleged intention of extracting economic or political concessions when the borrower cannot meet its repayment obligations. The shiny new infrastructure, it turns out, comes at an incredibly high price, one that is not always measured in currency alone, but in sovereignty. The mechanics of this trap are deceptively simple. Chinese state-owned banks offer massive loans for ambitious and often financially risky infrastructure projects. These loans often have opaque terms, non-disclosure clauses, and interest rates that are higher than those from multilateral development banks. When a country, often burdened by commodity price fluctuations or economic mismanagement, inevitably struggles to repay the debt, Beijing is presented with a powerful form of leverage. Suddenly, the friendly partner transforms into a demanding creditor, and the discussions shift from development to asset seizure, turning a nation's debt into China's strategic gain. The real-world examples of this phenomenon serve as a stark warning. In Sri Lanka, the inability to repay loans for the Hambantota port resulted in the government handing over the port and 15,000 acres of surrounding land to a Chinese state-owned company on a 99-year lease. In Zambia, fears have mounted that the national electricity utility and international airport could fall under Chinese control due to mounting debt. In Kenya, the costly standard gauge railway, built with Chinese loans, has struggled to generate enough revenue, raising concerns about the future of the strategic port of Mombasa, which was reportedly used as collateral. These cases reveal a disturbing pattern. The win-win partnership can quickly become a zero-sum game, where China gains control of critical national assets, ports, mineral rights, or key industries. The friendship disguised as aid slowly reveals itself to be a transaction for ownership. The very infrastructure meant to bolster a nation's independence becomes a tool for its subjugation, chaining it to a new economic master. This is the hidden cost of the Belt and Road, the dark side of the generous offers that has made leaders like Captain Traoré profoundly wary of accepting Beijing's embrace. The trap is not the road itself, but the debt that paves it. Captain Ibrahim Traoré understands swapping one dependency for another isn't liberation. True sovereignty isn't changing masters. Whether control comes from the west or east, the result is the same: loss of autonomy. His skepticism is pragmatic. He knows the Chinese model can mirror the West, losing control of resources. Traoré is carefully weighing infrastructure development against debt risks. He won't gamble his country's future. This caution is radical, showing foresight and self-reliance. Traoré's government prioritizes internal solutions. The focus: food self-sufficiency, local industries, and security. This builds a resilient, independent nation negotiating from strength. He chooses self-sufficiency over foreign debt, avoiding the China trap. Faced with Western neocolonialism and Chinese debt-trap diplomacy, Captain Ibrahim Traoré has rejected the false choice. Instead, he's forging a new alliance. He's pioneering a third path, rooted in collective self-reliance and Pan-African solidarity. The core of this movement is the Alliance of Sahel States. This alliance represents a direct challenge to the old regional order. They made it clear that an attack on one would be considered an attack on all, creating a new axis of resistance. It is a strategic pivot toward a durable, self-sufficient security architecture. Captain Traoré's vision is as much economic as it is political or military. For decades, Burkina Faso's mineral wealth has enriched foreign corporations, leaving the local population in poverty. Traoré's government is now renegotiating mining contracts, demanding more revenue, local jobs, and environmental protections. The Alliance of Sahel States is also considering a new common currency, aiming to break free from the CFA franc and control their own monetary policy. The goal: build self-sufficiency, add value to local resources, and fund development from within. It's a difficult path, but one they see as the only way to true prosperity. Traoré's third path revives Pan-Africanism for a new era. Alone, Sahelian nations are vulnerable. United, they're a force. The Alliance of Sahel States is building real connections: roads, trade, and shared markets, beyond colonial-era institutions. Africa's youth, impatient for change, see hope in these leaders who promise dignity and agency. This movement rejects Africa's role as a battleground for foreign powers. Traoré's vision is a blueprint for sovereignty, inspiring others across the continent. It's a quiet revolution, aiming to redraw Africa's place in the world. History warns of the dangers facing leaders who defy global powers. Patrice Lumumba, Thomas Sankara, and Muammar Gaddafi all paid the ultimate price for challenging foreign interests. Lumumba was assassinated after seeking true independence. Sankara was overthrown for his anti-imperialist reforms. Gaddafi was toppled after pushing for a Pan-African currency. Each was removed when their vision threatened the status quo. Now, Traoré and his allies walk the same perilous path. The question: will they share the same fate or break the cycle? The stakes have never been higher. Today's countermeasures are more subtle: sanctions, isolation, and covert operations. Economic warfare is already underway, with sanctions crippling Sahelian economies and fueling public discontent. Diplomatic isolation brands new leaders as illegitimate, making alliances difficult. Media campaigns delegitimize their governments, framing them as threats to stability. Covert destabilization, funding opposition, spreading disinformation, arming proxies, further undermines their rule. The aim: make sovereignty unbearably costly, forcing collapse or regime change. The struggle is as much psychological as it is material. The fiercest battle is for public perception. Western media labeled Traoré a strongman, his government a regime, erasing the popular support behind the revolution. Economic hardships are blamed on new leaders, not on the sanctions imposed. Every setback is amplified as proof of inevitable failure. The goal: break the bond between leaders and people, and warn others not to follow. The fight for the Sahel is a fight for Africa's narrative. At the heart of resistance to sovereignty are multinational corporations profiting from Africa's instability. Weak governments sign away resources for a pittance, while corporations reap massive profits. These profits fund lobbying and political influence in the West, ensuring the system endures. Any leader challenging this order is branded a threat to global stability. Traoré's push for resource sovereignty threatens a multi-trillion-dollar supply chain. If he succeeds, others may follow, so the stakes are enormous. This is why the world's most powerful interests are watching and resisting every move. Beyond resource extraction, global finance profits from debt itself. Western aid and development loans are a highly profitable enterprise. The IMF and World Bank extend loans with interest, often exceeding the original principal. Africa has become a revenue stream, requiring perpetual need. A self-sufficient, debt-free Africa would be a terrible client. Traoré's rejection of this system makes him dangerous. A sovereign, debt-free Burkina Faso threatens a system meticulously constructed over 60 years. Global superpowers benefit from a dependent and divided Africa. A continent of separate, competing nations is easier to manipulate than a united Pan-African bloc. The strategy of divide and conquer continues in the modern era. By playing nations against each other, global powers ensure Africa never unites as a rival. This division allows for military bases and preferential access to vital resources. A weak, fragmented Africa is a compliant Africa. Captain Traoré's alliance of Sahel states is a countermove to this divide-and-conquer strategy. They are rejecting the role of pawns and are trying to become players. This threatens the grandmasters, as their model of Pan-African sovereignty could inspire the continent to unite. In the grand theater of global politics, the most powerful statement can sometimes be silence. Captain Ibrahim Traoré's quietness toward the world's traditional power brokers is a roar of defiance. It is the sound of a new path being cleared, avoiding the well-trodden roads. His silent rebellion challenges the premise that an African nation must choose a side. This silence forces the world to listen more closely to his actions, a commitment to the people of Burkina Faso. It is the drafting of a new blueprint for 21st century sovereignty. The significance of this quiet revolution extends far beyond the borders of the Sahel. His silence is the most threatening sound in geopolitics today. The story of Captain Ibrahim Traoré and the alliance of Sahel states is far from over. The forces arrayed against them are formidable. The path they have chosen is fraught with peril. Africa stands at a profound crossroads. One path leads toward a horizon of true self-determination. The shifting of the global chessboard is an earthquake, and its epicenter is in West Africa. The next chapter is unwritten. Please like, share, and subscribe, and thanks.